He told us he was a genius. He told us he was a god. He told us he was building something the world couldn't understand. At first, we laughed. Then we worshipped. And now, we wonder if we're watching the rise of a new kingdom or the collapse of a man with no one left to say no. Because somewhere between the music, the fashion, the sermons, and the whispered promises of a better world, Kanye West stopped being just an artist. He became a movement, a prophet, a force gathering followers, building schools, erecting compounds, designing uniforms, rewriting futures. But the question is Ye building the future, or is he building a cult? And if he is it intentional? Or is it the final act of a man trying to outrun his own collapse? Today, we're diving deep into the empire of Kanye West. The family, the followers, the fantasy, and the dangerously thin line between genius and control. This is Inquisitive. And this is the Kanye cult, building a movement or losing control. Before the compounds, the uniforms, the schools, before the Sunday service choirs and the isolation in Wyoming, Kanye West was already laying the groundwork for something bigger than music. When Kanye first broke through in 2004 with The College Dropout, he wasn't the king of controversy yet. He was the scrappy outsider, the art school kid with a backpack and a pink polo shirt, challenging the gangster rap archetype that ruled the charts. And he was brilliant. The College Dropout was raw, emotional, and honest. It painted Kanye as a truth teller in a sea of fakes. Critics and fans didn't just praise him, they anointed him. He won a Grammy for Best Rap Album. He sold millions. And every award, every magazine cover, every genius headline added another layer to a growing belief Kanye had about himself. That he wasn't just successful, he was special. But even back then, there were signs of something deeper, something more dangerous. He wasn't just good. He was the best, and he wasn't afraid to tell you. At award shows, in interviews, backstage, Kanye spoke about himself in ways that felt half joking, half apocalyptic. And everyone laughed. Because it was Kanye. It was just Kanye being Kanye. The arrogance was part of the charm. Even early on, Kanye would compare himself to historic figures like Walt Disney, Michelangelo, and Steve Jobs. At first, it was treated like a running joke in pop culture. When he interrupted Taylor Swift at the 2009 MTV Video Music Awards, storming the stage, grabbing the mic, and declaring, "Beyoncé had one of the best videos of all time." The world was horrified, but also weirdly entertained. He became a meme. He was parodied on South Park in the Fish Sticks episode as a delusional egomaniac. He was mocked on late-night TV, roasted in skits, and dragged in headlines. But he was still everywhere. Award shows, collaborations, front row at Fashion Week. And every time he came back bigger. Instead of losing his career, Kanye grew even more untouchable. He became proof that in celebrity culture, controversy wasn't a liability. It was fuel. In a 2013 BBC Radio 1 interview with Zane Lowe, one of his rawest interviews ever, Kanye ranted for nearly an hour about fashion, society, racism, art, and being the nucleus of culture. It sounded unhinged. It also sounded like a man who genuinely believed he was a prophet. And by that point, who could tell him otherwise? Because every time Kanye pushed the boundaries, whether musically, socially, or personally, the world kept giving him exactly what he craved. More attention, more power, more confirmation that he was untouchable. The myth of Kanye West wasn't just built by Kanye. It was built by all of us too, laughing, cheering, forgiving, rewarding. Until eventually, it stopped being funny. And Kanye stopped being just a genius with a god complex. He began to become the god he believed the world needed. While the world was still laughing at Kanye's outbursts, he was quietly building something much bigger behind the scenes. Long before Kanye isolated himself in Wyoming, long before Donda Academy or the Sunday Service Choir, she was crafting a visual and sonic universe that looked less like an artistic brand and more like the early stages of a movement. It started with the sound. The Yeezus album, released in 2013, wasn't just abrasive. It was apocalyptic, distorted, industrial, minimal. Tracks like Black Skinhead and I Am a God didn't sound like radio hits. They sounded like war cries. And the tour, that's where the shift became undeniable. The Yeezus tour was built like a cathedral. Kanye performed in front of a massive, jagged mountain, a physical embodiment of struggle, isolation, and ascent. Every night he staged a pilgrimage, wandering in ragged clothes across the stage, until finally meeting a figure dressed as Jesus. The show's climax, Kanye ascended the mountain, both literally and metaphorically becoming divine. The Yeezus stage was designed in consultation with S. Devlin, a world-famous stage designer who specializes in sacred space architecture. Devlin herself later said Kanye's Yeezus stage was meant to feel holy, confrontational, and transformative. Even the audience's experience was engineered, with stark lighting, religious iconography, minimalist soundscapes. Kanye controlled the environment in a way that went far beyond a concert. It felt more like a ritual. But it wasn't just the music. It was what Kanye and his followers wore. The Yeezy fashion lines, starting with Season 1 in 2015, introduced a world of earth tones, shapeless garments, and uniforms instead of outfits. Gone were the pink polos and Louis Vuitton backpacks. In their place, dystopian survival gear. Clothes that looked like they came from a post-apocalyptic commune. Heavy boots, distressed fabrics, military aesthetics, and people wore them proudly. Not because they were stylish in the traditional sense, but because wearing Yeezy marked you as a believer. It said, "I get it. I'm part of something bigger than fashion." Kanye cited brutalist architect Le Corbusier as a major influence on his design philosophy during this era. Le Corbusier was obsessed with functional, austere buildings that stripped away luxury and individuality in favor of communal living. Exactly the kind of ideology you'd need if you were planning to build a new society. And then came Wyoming. In 2018, Kanye bought massive tracts of land outside Cody, Wyoming, over 4,500 acres in total. He didn't just want a mansion. He wanted to build a city. Reports and leaked plans showed Kanye's designs for domed structures built from sustainable materials, self-contained communities, agricultural self-sufficiency, a new way of living based around art, fashion, and faith. In one 2019 interview, Kanye compared his Wyoming vision to the early Christian monastic communities, isolated groups that abandoned society to build perfect cities of God. He wasn't buying property. He was buying pilgrimage sites. Sound, style, space. By 2018, Kanye West wasn't just dressing differently, singing differently, or living differently. He was building an aesthetic system, one that stripped away individuality, isolated followers, demanded loyalty, and replaced the outside world with his vision of purity and salvation. In other words, he wasn't branding a new album. He was branding a new world. By 2018, Kanye West wasn't just dreaming about new worlds. He was buying them. In the remote, windswept plains of Cody, Wyoming, Kanye purchased over 4,500 acres of land across multiple ranches. Not a sprawling estate like other celebrities. Not a Hollywood fortress. This was something different. Wide open spaces. Miles from major cities. The kind of isolation you don't stumble into, you seek out. At first, it sounded harmless. Kanye said he wanted space for creativity. A quiet place to work on his music, his clothing lines, his architecture dreams. But quickly, the Wyoming move started feeling less like a retreat, and more like an exodus. Kanye wasn't just building a home. He was building a self-sufficient city. Architectural reports revealed that Kanye was obsessed with the idea of sacred geometry, an ancient belief that certain shapes and layouts could connect humans to the divine. Think circles, domes, spirals, the same layouts used in some ancient temples. Wyoming wasn't just supposed to be a recording hub. It was supposed to be the New Jerusalem, a pure place, an untainted society, a controlled environment for the next phase of Kanye's movement. And it wasn't just where he lived, it was who he brought with him. Kanye began moving his closest collaborators, musicians, fashion designers, and architects onto the ranches, working, living, and worshipping together, separated from the noise of Los Angeles, New York, and Hollywood. Multiple former employees later reported that once you moved to Wyoming, you were expected to live by Kanye's schedule, Kanye's rules, and Kanye's mood swings. 3 a.m. work sessions, sudden, unexplained job changes, loyalty tests disguised as team-building exercises, no outside press access unless personally approved by Kanye. The world outside the ranch became the enemy. People who left the inner circle were treated like defectors. Newcomers were vetted based on loyalty, not talent. The environment didn't feel like a creative retreat. It started feeling like a religious compound. Some longtime followers have pointed out that Kanye's fascination with Wyoming mirrors Jonestown, the infamous community founded by Jim Jones in the 1970s. It was remote, self-sustaining, closed off from outside influence, and built around the charisma and vision of a single man. And while no one's accusing Kanye of those same atrocities, the patterns, the isolation, the blind loyalty, the unchallenged authority were becoming harder and harder to ignore. Kanye wasn't just making beats on a ranch. He was practicing what it would take to build a world where he was at the center of everything. Unquestioned, unchallenged, and completely in control. The only question left was, would anyone follow him? Spoiler, they already were. If Wyoming was Kanye's wilderness, Sunday service was his altar. In early 2019, seemingly out of nowhere, Kanye West introduced the world to his latest project, a traveling spiritual experience. No ticket sales, no press releases, no real explanation. Just whispers of secret invite-only gatherings where Kanye led choirs, band members, and small hand-picked audiences in musical worship in backyards, deserts, canyons, and eventually BEM stadiums. It wasn't billed as a concert. It wasn't a church. It wasn't a tour. It was something new, something sacred. At the center of it all, Kanye. At first glance, Sunday service seemed beautiful. Soulful, gospel-infused reinterpretations of Kanye's greatest hits. Elaborate choirs dressed uniformly in neutral tones. Attendees swaying, hands lifted to the sky, in scenes that felt equal parts religious revival and art installation. But underneath the soaring vocals and feel-good spirituality, Sunday service was about control. Performers at Sunday service were often required to sign non-disclosure agreements, forbidding them from discussing the events publicly. Even staff and choir members had restrictions on media appearances, interviews, and social media posts. This wasn't just Kanye sharing his faith. It was Kanye controlling the narrative of his faith. And the dress code, it wasn't optional. Everyone, performers and guests alike, were expected to wear muted earth tones, flowing garments, and simple designs. Visual unity, ego erased, individuality blurred into collective worship. When Sunday service performed at Coachella 2019, Kanye had his team build a massive raised mound of grass, literally a hill, in the middle of the desert. He stood atop it, preaching and performing, while the crowds gathered below. The symbolism obvious: a mountain. A Messiah figure elevated above his flock. Literal higher ground. Kanye wasn't just leading a service. He was positioning himself as the center of spiritual energy. And behind the scenes, cracks began to show. Former Sunday service staffers later sued Kanye for unpaid wages and unsafe working conditions. Reports surfaced about grueling rehearsal schedules, sometimes starting at 4 a.m, without proper overtime pay. Some performers claimed they weren't allowed to leave rehearsals without Kanye's approval. The same patterns from Wyoming were emerging here. The demands of loyalty, obedience, and silence. Sunday service was praised in the media as Kanye's spiritual awakening. But for those paying attention, it started looking less like salvation and more like indoctrination. A movement where art, faith, and ego blurred so tightly together, you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And just like that, Kanye had something he had never truly had before. Followers. Real ones. The stage was set. The uniforms were ready. The songs were written. Now all he needed was a new family. And when the first one slipped through his fingers, Kanye would do everything he could to rebuild it. For Kanye West, family was never just personal. It was the final pillar in his empire. When he married Kim Kardashian in 2014, it wasn't just a celebrity wedding. It was a coronation. The music world's self-declared genius. The reality TV world's reigning queen. Together, they were culture incarnate. Wealth, power, influence. The perfect canvas onto which Kanye could project his next great creation. A dynasty. Kanye didn't see marriage as a partnership. He saw it as a mission. In interviews, he often described Kim as more than a wife. She was a symbol, the ultimate muse, the proof of his success, the embodiment of modern beauty and status. And as their family grew, so did Kanye's language. In multiple interviews between 2015 and 2018, Kanye casually referred to his children as the architects of the new world. Not celebrities, not heirs, leaders. And Kim, at times he spoke about her with almost religious reverence, describing her Met Gala looks, her pregnancies, even her public image, as if they were acts of divine design. But even in paradise, control crept in. By 2018, Kanye began openly directing every aspect of Kim's public image. He started pushing her toward more conservative fashion, would reportedly discourage the ultra-sexualized branding that had built her empire, designing looks for her that emphasized devotion, purity, and submission. Kanye's involvement in Kim's 2019 Met Gala look was so intense that he reportedly told her hours before the event that her look was too sexy for his wife to be showing off. In Kanye's mind, Kim wasn't just a partner. She was a public vessel, a reflection of the new, purified vision he was beginning to impose on his inner world. And then it all cracked. By 2020, the marriage was strained beyond repair. Kanye's increasingly erratic behavior, his presidential run announcement, his Twitter rants about Kim and Kris Jenner publicly humiliated the family he had spent years mythologizing. Kim filed for divorce in early 2021, and in that moment, Kanye didn't just lose his wife. He lost the symbolic heart of everything he was trying to build. The holy family, he believed, that he had constructed was shattered. The city of the future he imagined for his children slipping out of reach. Some Kanye followers believe his public meltdowns in 2021 and 2022 weren't about heartbreak. They were about prophecy collapse. Because if Kanye had built himself into a messiah figure, Kim had been cast, at least in his mind, as his Mary Magdalene. When she walked away, it wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a spiritual apocalypse. And in the ashes of that collapse, Kanye wasn't interested in healing. He was interested in rebuilding. Faster, stronger, stranger. New uniforms, new rituals, and new chosen people. If Kanye West couldn't preserve his first family, he was determined to create a new one. But not with partners, and not with friends, with children. In 2022, Kanye quietly launched Donda Academy, a mysterious private school named after his late mother, Dr. Donda West. On the surface, it sounded promising, a focus on creativity, emphasis on music, faith, and emotional intelligence, a new model for education in a broken system. But almost immediately, the details, or more accurately, the lack of details, raised red flags. There was no official curriculum listed, no accredited teachers confirmed, no traditional educational standards outlined. Instead, Donda Academy operated in total secrecy. Families were required to sign non-disclosure agreements just to enroll their children. Students were not allowed to discuss what happened inside the school walls. Parents weren't given full transparency over lesson plans or staff hiring. In effect, Kanye wasn't just building a school. He was building a self-contained, unquestioned society. Uniforms were mandatory, but not typical polos and khakis. Donda Academy uniforms mirrored Kanye's Yeezy aesthetics. Dark, heavy hoodies, baggy black pants, and no logos except Kanye's own branding. Children marched into massive, sterile gymnasiums for their daily routines, photographed sometimes in eerie silence, standing at attention like a small, obedient army. There were no traditional desks in classrooms. There were reports that students sat on the floor during lessons, symbolically lowering themselves to create a new, humble foundation for education, according to a source close to the academy. In one now-deleted Instagram post, Kanye described Donda Academy as preparing the next generation of leaders to rise above the brainwashing of society. A subtle nod to the idea that the outside world, education, media, and government were hopelessly corrupt. Only his followers would be pure enough to rebuild it. And if you listened closely, you could hear the echoes of other leaders throughout history who promised salvation through isolation. But behind the utopian promises, things were falling apart. Teachers began resigning en masse, citing chaotic leadership and unpaid wages. Allegations surfaced about safety violations, lack of proper educational oversight, and even cult-like prayer mandates. Lawsuits from former staff members painted a picture of a school more concerned with loyalty to Kanye than actual child welfare. Yet, families still enrolled their children. Some drawn by the dream, some by the fame, some because they truly believed Kanye West was offering something society had denied them. Donda Academy wasn't about education. It was about indoctrination. Generation of kids raised under Kanye's values, away from mainstream influence, taught not just math and music, but loyalty. Loyalty to the truth only he could see. Loyalty to a new future only he could build. And just like that, Kanye wasn't just building a brand anymore. He was building a congregation. After Kim Kardashian, the world expected Kanye to retreat. Instead, he re-emerged with a new wife, a new muse, and a new message. In early 2023, Kanye married Bianca Censori, an architectural designer who had worked for Yeezy for years. There was no grand wedding, no Vogue photo shoot, no media circus, just a sudden private ceremony. And almost immediately, Bianca's transformation began. The vibrant, smiling employee vanished. In her place, a figurine molded by Kanye's new vision. Bianca's wardrobe shifted overnight. Gone were her professional modern outfits. In came the hyper-minimalist, sometimes hypersexual, sometimes monastic clothing. Shrouds of fabric, Nude bodysuits, sheer coverings that looked more like costume than couture. The more public appearances they made, the clearer the symbolism became. Bianca was veiled, silent, and often nearly naked in public spaces, yet often appearing vacant, subdued, and detached from her surroundings. Photographers noticed that Bianca almost never broke eye contact with Kanye during events. When she did, her expression often remained blank, almost rehearsed. She wasn't just accompanying Kanye, she was presenting him, like an artwork or a relic. In rare paparazzi footage, Kanye was overheard giving Bianca strict instructions about how to pose, how to walk, and even when to smile. In one clip, he reportedly directed her entire posture for a restaurant entrance, treating a casual outing like a staged religious procession. This wasn't a partnership, it was choreography. And the audience, us. Some Kanye followers believe Bianca Censori isn't just a partner. She's been positioned as a symbol in Kanye's expanding mythology. In religious movements and cults throughout history, charismatic leaders often present sacred companions. These are figures meant to symbolize spiritual purity, rebirth, and loyalty. Jim Jones had Carolyn Layton. Charles Manson had his family girls. Is this what Kanye has done with Bianca? But there's a tragic undercurrent too. Because whatever Bianca Censori was before, an ambitious designer, a rising star in the fashion world, that person has been eclipsed. Absorbed into the Kanye West mythology. Transformed from individual into iconography. Bianca isn't just Kanye's wife. She's the visual proof that submission, devotion, and rebirth are possible if you give yourself fully to yeah. And for Kanye, that may be the most important building block of all. Not love, not partnership, proof of concept. At first glance, Kanye's world looks chaotic, like a genius unraveling in real time. But if you study it closer, it starts to look terrifyingly familiar. Because cults, whether religious, political, artistic, or ideological, don't usually announce themselves with a grand flourish. They grow quietly, charming at first, slowly shifting, tightening control. And the steps Kanye West has taken over the past decade mirror the blueprints of history's most infamous movements almost perfectly. First move is always isolation. Kanye didn't just move to Wyoming for a quieter lifestyle. He moved to build a new world, far from the media, far from industry executives, far from anyone who might question him. Former collaborators from the Wyoming sessions would later whisper that if you left the ranch without Kanye's permission, you didn't just lose a job. You were cut off permanently. It wasn't about privacy. It was about sovereignty. Control the environment, and you control the reality. It's the same tactic Jim Jones used to move his followers into the jungle. The same move David Koresh made when he fortified his compound in Waco. Out there in the plains of Wyoming, Kanye didn't just find solitude. He found a blank canvas for total authority. But isolation is only the beginning. Uniformity comes next. In Kanye's world, individuality began to evaporate. The Yeezy clothing lines shifted fashion into survivalist workwear. Earth tones, shapeless garments, militaristic boots. At Sunday service, choirs swayed in identical robes, singing as one unified voice. At Donda Academy, students were stripped of personal style entirely. Black hoodies, no jewelry, no visible differences between them. Kanye once described Yeezy clothing as preparing humanity for what's coming. And that wasn't just marketing. It's a glimpse into a worldview where unity meant surrender. When everyone looks the same, it's easier to believe you're part of something greater, and harder to imagine walking away. Then came the shift in language. Kanye didn't just create new music or fashion. He created new definitions. He didn't host concerts. He held worship experiences. He didn't build a school. He created a new future. He didn't lose a marriage. He fought a holy war to save his family from brainwashing. At Sunday service, insiders reported that only positive, affirming language was permitted. Criticism wasn't debated, it was silenced. Words became the rules. The rules became the truth. History has seen this before. Charles Manson rewrote language into prophecy. Jim Jones forbade followers from even thinking critically about his sermons. Change the words and you change the reality they describe. No cult playbook is complete without the creation of enemies. Over time, Kanye began positioning himself as a victim of vast interconnected forces. The media, the music industry, the fashion world, the so-called brainwashed masses, even his own family. Each betrayal, each lost friendship, each collapsed project didn't weaken the myth. It fed it. In Kanye's new narrative, he wasn't simply misunderstood, he was martyred. He compared himself to Christ, to Mandela, to Galileo. Persecuted not because he was wrong, but because he was too right for the broken world around him. And when the old world fails you, there's only one step left. You build a new one. Just like Jonestown vowed a promised land. Just like Waco swore salvation through isolation. Just like Heaven's Gate offered a new world beyond the stars. When the leader controls your home, your clothes, your speech, your school, your worship, and tells you the outside world is irredeemable, the cage is almost complete. You just don't realize you're inside it yet. This isn't chaos, it seems, from the outside. It's structure, ancient, deliberate, and disturbingly effective. The followers are in place. The kingdom is being built. And the only question left is, how far will Kanye go? And how many will follow him all the way? For a long time, it was easy to dismiss Kanye's spiral as part of the art. As just another chapter in a career built on chaos. Another storm before another masterpiece. But the longer you watch, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between the performance and the collapse. Because the structures Kanye has built, the compounds, the uniforms, the isolation, the mythologizing of his own name, they aren't temporary. They're not album promo cycles. They're not marketing stunts. They're infrastructure. And now we're left to ask, is Kanye West building the foundation of a new cultural movement, or the wreckage of his own mind? The conversation around Kanye's mental health isn't new. For years, he's spoken openly about being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He's rapped about it, joked about it, weaponized it. And for a long time, fans and critics alike gave him space. Mental illness became a shorthand for everything he did. A get-out-of-jail-free card for every public outburst, every meltdown, every conspiracy-laced rant. But at a certain point, you have to stop asking whether Kanye is sick, and start asking whether he knows exactly what he's doing. Because it's been over a decade since Kanye lost his mother, Dr. Donda West. Over 10 years since the woman who grounded him, who challenged him, who set limits on him, has been gone. Her absence left a hole no one could fill. Not Jay-Z, not Kim, not his collaborators, not his managers, not even his children. Donda wasn't just a parent. She was the only voice Kanye ever seemed to respect enough to truly hear. And without her, there was no counterweight. No one left who could tell him no without getting pushed aside. There are whispers that Kim Kardashian tried. That she organized interventions. That she begged him to seek help privately. That she endured public humiliation in the name of protecting him. But even Kim, at the height of her fame and influence, was no match for the world Kanye had built in his own mind. She left. And in her absence, Kanye's spiral didn't slow down. It accelerated. Because if Kanye West once grieved his mother, that grief has long since mutated into something else. This isn't mourning anymore. It's messianic. The tragedy is that Kanye might believe he's saving himself, when in reality he's leading himself further into isolation, delusion, and collapse. Or maybe this was always the plan. Maybe the cult of Kanye was never a byproduct of fame. Maybe it was the goal all along. Maybe the music, the fashion, the controversy were never the main event. They were the sermon, the initiation, the bait. The Kanye West of today isn't asking for forgiveness. He isn't asking for understanding, and he isn't asking for help. He's demanding complete loyalty and devotion. And whether he's spiraling from unchecked grief and illness, or masterminding a cultural revolution in real time, one thing is certain. This story doesn't end with an album. It ends with an empire, or a tragedy. The kingdom of Kanye is still being built. The only question left is, how many will be standing with him when it finally falls? At the end of the day, everything we've discussed here, the structures, the patterns, the theories, are just that. Theories. Speculations based on what we see publicly. Pieces of a puzzle built from interviews, public appearances, and documented behavior. We don't know Kanye personally. We don't know what struggles he's fighting behind closed doors. And we don't wish him harm. In fact, we wish healing. For Kanye, for his family, and most of all, for his children. Because whatever's unfolding, whether it's a movement, a meltdown, or something in between, there are real lives caught in the fallout. If you or someone you love is struggling with mental health, there are resources. There is help. You are never alone. And if these patterns of self-destruction feel familiar, please know, it's never too late to reach out. This is Inquisitive. Thank you for watching.